So we're here to activate abundance. We are here to live an abundant life and to create abundant living through our consciousness in this collective field. We are here to be smiling upon each other. We are here to be activating love. We are here to be emissaries of light. We are here to engage that light. We are here to make it feel good to be in community. I recently came across this little article, I don't know if anyone else saw it, that said Morgan Freeman is looking at moving to Kansas City. Did anyone see that one? There's a little article it was in WCPM 3 News, and it said that in Kansas City, Missouri, it's a big surprise to everyone in Los Angeles, Hollywood actor Morgan Freeman reveals in a new interview that he is moving to the Kansas City, Missouri area. I think he's coming to Unity Village. Don't you think? I think he'd fit in really well here. He told the magazine, he told the magazine that he's tired of the LA lifestyle and is looking for a big change in his life. And then it quotes him. And he goes into this quote, but what he talked about was having visited Kansas City over the past few years, and he said the people there, I'm looking for that experience, I'm paraphrasing, he said they're genuine. And he said, every community has problems, but the people there are good, decent people, and they care about their community. Those are the things that I find most important in deciding where to live. He also mentioned the good barbecue. And he said that he's not retiring. But this was the article. But I thought, isn't that a beautiful statement of saying the people, right? People. Do you feel the people around you? Do you feel something about the people in the community with which you live? And it makes a difference, doesn't it? We like to be in communities around people where we feel good, where we feel like there's an authentic resonance, where we feel like there is space for us to grow. We also like communities, do we not, where people are shining on each other, right? That builds us up. Communities where we can be accepted, right? And people move across the country to find these experiences. People shift families and sometimes even let go of their birth family for a spiritual family. Sometimes shift relationships, friendships, whatever it is around them, right? And we do that same process within us too, don't we? So that we feel home, we feel like we have a nurtured space to grow, a consciousness to grow in. Because what the human condition is looking for is fertile ground. What the human condition is looking for is a place for its beingness to evolve and expand, right? And part of that is about really being an authentic self, being one's authentic self on the path, being one's authentic self in spiritual growth, and being accepted, and having a positive, nurturing environment. On the other hand, just a while back, we heard about some things going on in my home state of Indiana, as far as states starting to make decisions and regulations about, laws, about people's lives, about how we can live or we can't live according to the law, right? I think of it as human rights. I just think of it as blanket human rights. And recently, we've heard things in the news about North Carolina doing the same thing. North Carolina making some decisions about human rights in their state. And what has been some of the responses? What have some of the responses been? I know that I've heard PayPal has pulled out of bringing a bunch of business into the state of North Carolina because of the laws that they're starting to create. I have heard that the boss, that Bruce Springsteen has canceled his concerts there. So people are starting to speak out, and people are using the power of their word and the power of their influence, what it is that I bring to the table, right? Because that is a powerful thing, right? To say, what I bring to the table, I'm not going to bring it to this table if other people can't sit at this table with me. And therein lies our power to shift and our power to change consciousness. Our power to say, the table I want to sit at is the table where people are included, the table where spiritual and growth in any way, integrous growth, not corrupted, not tweaked, not out of integrity, right? But spiritual growth in whatever way you want to call it, where those things are honored, where there's a space, right? We talk a lot, though, about the them that doesn't create this space, don't we? We talk about it as something other than us. But we know in unity, we practice that everything starts right here, right? Everything starts within, and from this space, in this space, lies our power. So we're here to be activating abundance in community through all sorts of ways of giving, all sorts of ways of sharing. And with that comes a great spiritual practice. We've been talking about tithing of our time, talent, and treasure. We've talked about the idea of circulation. So one of the biggest ways that we practice activating abundance is through service. And these people stepping forward, these organizations stepping forward, people standing for what they believe in, is sacred service, is it not? It's creating an environment. Sacred service creates an environment, and that environment that we have the ability to create is an environment for healing, an environment for growth. The great teacher Christian Murte talked about fear, and I was watching this interview with Christian Murte, and he said the brain can only function in complete security. In complete security. So when the brain is in complete security, that's when it functions. He says then it functions effortlessly, healthily, and not neurotically. That security is denied when we separate ourselves. That security is denied when we separate ourselves. For example, separating ourselves from each other, separating ourselves from other countries, separating ourselves through war. He says that what he's trying to get at in this expression is how stupid the mind is, he says. It wants security. It must have security, yet it is doing everything to destroy security. He talks about through the human condition, through humanity, and through governments. He said that we are destroying security in the name of providing it. So under the guise of providing security, we are destroying it, destroying true security. He says we are programmed to destroy the security we are seeking. We are programmed to destroy the security we are seeking. So if that's what we know about the human condition, what is the spiritual condition? The spiritual condition is one that overcomes that, right? The spiritual condition is one that is always expanding, always improving, always including even more than it thought was itself. And we do that through circulating. We have all of the general ideas that we've talked about or we've heard about in our lives about sacred service, volunteering, spiritual service, giving, tithing of our talents. We know, don't we? We know by now that if you want more time, we'll give your time. If you want to have a softer world around you, a more helpful world, then become a helper. We know all of these things. We know that if we want to experience the world we want, that we have to activate it, we have to become it. And we know that the idea is true, right? That people are not separate from us. We can tell by the law of circulation that we cannot harm one group of people or one space or place that we call other without harming ourselves. We know that that's true, right? It's truly impossible because we live amongst each other. We live within a full world, and we're faced globally with a whole different paradigm. We're faced with a paradigm where even if you look at the environment and pollution, there's no way to separate yourself, right? We are all one. Whatever growth and expression happens in one country, on one continent, will make its way to the oceans, will make its way in the air, will make its way to everywhere. We're experiencing our spiritual truth on a global level. So what's going to make the difference in activating our spiritual growth through that way? We also know that it's often, we're told stories about people that have activated volunteerism, that have gotten involved in sacred service. And what do they always say? 9 times out of 10. Instead of saying that I feel like I'm giving to someone else, they feel like they're receiving. They feel like they're being served. They feel like it is somehow growing them. So we know all of these things. We not, though, hesitate to get involved. We do this funny thing, we procrastinate. We sometimes have fear of commitments. But what spiritually, I want to talk today about what spiritually is going on when we get involved. When we get involved. Because there are some immense spiritual shifts that happen when we get involved in our world. The first shift is that we cease being a victim of anything, and we become a co-creator. We cease being a consumer, and we become a giver. We cease being a receiver or a taker, and we become a creator. Why is all of that important? Because all of those latter pieces are our divine birthright. All of those latter pieces are what we are. The other huge shift that happens is that we become more of ourselves. We become more of ourselves. How is that even possible? How is it possible that by giving, by helping, by serving, I could become more of myself? Through that experience, the line begins to blur. The line that shows me what is me and not me, mine and not mine, begins to get fuzzy. And as that line begins to get fuzzy, our identity begins to shift. When it's all about me and my world exists right here, whether it's my own personal world or whether it's my family's world, or whether I've taken one step out and it's my community's world, or whether I've taken one more huge step out and it's my global world, or whether I've actually blown all of the walls off my world and I've taken the leap into the cosmic world, and that becomes my identity. That identity shift, that identity evolution is the evolution of the Christ consciousness, is the evolution of enlightenment, is the evolution of awakening. That's why people like Mother Teresa have taught and led by example. That's why people have given their lives for this greater self that is beyond a separate self, beyond just me and mine. We know that from the development of a child, right, what happens? I have a nephew that's 2 right now, and it's so cute watching those stages of development because they get to the point where they start knowing what's me and mine, They also start expanding their power of yes and no, recognizing they have that power. They have the power of choice, and recognizing what they are in this separate body being. But as we evolve and grow, right, do we not start teaching kids, that little stage where they're like, mine, mine. He's not at that stage right now, but where they do the mine. And then they start evolving beyond that. But what happens if we're not on the spiritual path? What happens if we're not on the spiritual path? What happens if we're not applying spiritual principles? We think we grow up, but we just get bigger. We think we grow up, but we just get bigger. We're just a bigger, larger expression, using our power, using our yes and no to define what is me and mine. Only when we activate these spiritual laws of abundance, only when we begin to circulate, we completely realize and then begin to create from, act from, ideate from, and experience ourselves as greater than who we appear to be. And that's the spiritual path. That's spiritual development and growth. If we're willing to step out of this separate self, and then we're willing to expand even beyond the family self, and then we're willing to expand even beyond community self, to the global self, and into the cosmic self, this is the evolution of our minds. This is the evolution of our creative consciousness. We redefine who we are as being. We become our true person, our true self. And why is this so important? And how does sacred service activate that? Well, sacred service is a great way to correct wrong perceptions. It is a great way to dispel illusions. It is a great way to break down our thinking. It is a great way to redefine ourselves. And we're here, are we not, to always continually be redefining ourselves, or ultimately getting to the place where we're not defining ourselves at all anymore. When we step into service, when we circulate our talents, we begin to allow ourselves to operate in another field of creation, in a field of God consciousness that is a creative force and a creative power that goes beyond the boundaries of ourselves. Why is that so important? Because it is our true nature. You know, one of the things about the prayer, the Our Father, and it's translated in Aramaic too. If you haven't seen the Aramaic form, it's a good version to pick up. But I believe that spiritually, a prayer that's written in the language of we, is a prayer that is aligned with our true being and our true self. Because until we begin to operate as we truly are in our spiritual nature, which is whole and complete at each level. It's not that I'm not complete without this. It's whole and complete in each level, whole and complete as an individual, whole and complete as a family, as relationships, whole and complete as a community, whole and complete as a globe, and whole and complete as a cosmic consciousness. Until we begin to operate in all of those fields, we're not developing our birthright. We're not developing all of our powers. It would be like Charles Fillmore, ideated the 12 powers. And he talked about how when we develop these powers, love, life, wisdom, when we develop these, we are awakening the enlightened state of consciousness, the enlightened state of being. But what would happen if we just developed one? What would happen if we just developed our power of will? And that was the only one we focused on. We become what? Like Krishnamurti says, we become neurotic. It becomes imbalanced. So it is the same with our identity. When our identity is just about the self, it becomes neurotic, does it not? We begin to think that what is happening to me is what is happening to everyone and what is the only important thing to happen. And we begin to not be able to see with any other field of vision or view. And when that happens, we begin to separate, we begin to alienate, we begin to control, we begin to manipulate. We begin to create systems of dysfunction because it's not safe to engage in that other, because we are not identified with ourselves as other. But once we begin to evolve and we begin to grow all of these aspects of self that is beyond me and my body, then we begin to include, then we begin to expand, then we are a space where people want to move to. Then we are a family people want to be in. We are a community people want to join. We are a globe, a planet, a consciousness people feel like they belong to. But only when we're willing to take those steps. And those steps are the spiritual practice. It is ultimately all about us taking responsibility for every aspect of our creation. About each of us and all of us as a collective taking responsibility for our creation. I want to share with you a reading from Merzel in the 24/7 Dharma book. He says this: "The barriers that separate you from me, outside from inside, will dissolve. The mind will be open, aware, alert, not burdened with its own accumulations, acquisitions, ideologies, beliefs, knowledge, and old experiences. This expands the mind, which is boundless, lives timeless, spaciously, without concern for security." This is the practice. When Krishnamurti said that the fear comes from not having security, not having our basic needs met, that the mind cannot operate when the basic needs are met, this is the spiritual practice. Because we can hustle all day to get all of our ideas of what the physical needs are met, and we will be hustling for the rest of our lives. The master teacher came and taught that it's not about manipulating all of the circumstances, it's about changing the mind. It goes on to say, to such a mind, life is truly extraordinary. A mind such as this one with life is one with life itself, one with Dharma. That is why we call it the Buddha mind, because it is awakened to the reality of life, moment by moment. It is an all-inclusive mind, and nothing is excluded from it. It is an all-inclusive mind, and nothing is excluded from it. Let's breathe into that. If my mind is an all-inclusive mind and nothing is excluded from it. He says most of us live with the idea that we know who we are. But really, who we are is so big that we can't get our mind around it. We can't conceive of it because it is unlimited. We can't grasp who we are, and so we can never really know. So you are closer to the truth when you don't know who you are, and that is very liberating. So are we ready to enter into the liberating experience of finding the self beyond self, of expanding our identity, of allowing ourselves the fertile ground and the environment not to become neurotic, but to expand? Not to allow our minds and our sense of self to atrophy into a small, separate place, but to allow our power to co-create, to expand. Because when we do this, we can do more than we could ever do as an individual. The steps are springing into service. Fully springing into service, finding a place and a space in life where we are passionate or where we're simply willing to say, here I am. What is there for me to do, to bring, to share, to give here? And allowing that to be a spiritual practice, not out of the idea that something is lacking or wanting or needing, because that idea is an idea that comes with some sort of elevated limited idea, an elevated self that has a limited idea. And that illusion too will be broken. But to come from a space that I recognize I'm a circulatory being, if I am to activate all aspects of myself, I need to circulate. I need to circulate with this talented time of this being that I am. So find a place. Move from thinking about it to getting our feet wet and activating. Move from being an observer to a creator. Whether it's getting involved in a social organization, getting involved in spiritual community, getting involved in politics and letting your voice be heard. Your voice matters. Your action is power. Never let the mind of the ego sing its song about what I do can't make that big of a difference. I don't have the authority, I don't have the power. Who you are, who we are as spiritual beings, trumps all of that. Move from being a consumer to being a creator. And move from being a receiver to being an activator. When we balance and we take these other sides of the coin, we will recognize that the coin is one, no? And we'll become more of what we're here to be. We'll activate more of what we're here to activate. And we'll live the life that we came here to live. So I invite you to take just a brief moment and close your outer eyes. And just tune in to who you are on the planet. And let us allow ourselves to set an intention on this day. An intention that we become able to know ourselves as more than we think we are in this moment, no matter where our consciousness is. Sweet Spirit of life, show us the next level of who I am, who we are. Be in me the yes that gets involved. be in me, the one that it gets to experience myself beyond my body, beyond my limited awareness, and create in me a divine curiosity that leads me, guides me to follow new paths of sacred service so that I can activate the good that I am here to bring into this world, into this life, as an expression of God consciousness in action. Allow this process to be so mystical and miraculous that it blows my mind's idea of what all of life is about and brings me into the full experience of living. And so it is. Namaste.